Thank you for inviting me to speak, as they always say. So this is a brief introduction and summary of the Cirencester Community Railway Project, which is something that my wife Jane and I have been working on for a few years now, and we now have quite a team, and one or two of them are members of the Science Society, and we've got quite a few of the team watching tonight, I believe. So we'll see. They'll probably tell me I'm getting it wrong. But so the objective of the project.
Of course, it may be.
Oh, I shall need to
mute
people now and then during the event. So the objective of it is to link Cirencester with the National Rail Network, so as to give easy access to Swindon, Gloucester, London, and the rest of the UK, Europe and the world. It would be nice if you could stroll onto the train, use your phone to buy yourself a ticket to Madrid or Hong Kong, maybe one day, but perhaps you'd be taking some luggage. Anyway, that's the idea. So I shall just, this is the what I shall be talking about. I'll speak about the introduction and a little bit of the history of the rail route, and the reasons we have for wanting to reopen it. Most of it's fairly obvious, but we'll list them anyway. The benefits of a rail service. Then what we're using is technology called Very Light Rail, and I'll explain why we're keen on that. And then I'll describe the route and some of the interesting key points on the way, which are challenges, which we have got solutions for. And then I'll give you an update and on how things are going and where we go next. So in the corner there, you see a picture of the Very Light Rail vehicle, which is quite exciting. But first of all, we'll go back to the beginning and just explain the route between Cirencester and Kemble. Was opened in 1841, and there's a picture there of Kemble Station in the early days. It was an interesting station because it wasn't allowed access to the outside world. Squire Gordon, who owned the land, didn't want members of the ordinary public wandering about on his land, so he said, well, they could build a station, but they had to only allow people to transfer from one train to another. And the permission was originally granted for a train up from Swindon to Stroud and then on to Cheltenham and Gloucester with a branch line going to Cirencester. But because they had trouble with digging the tunnel through the particular clays they had there, in fact, the Cirencester branch was opened and working before the rest of the line was operational. So that was running for several years, and you can see a picture there of Cirencester Station. And it's interesting because the platform is still there, and the building, the Brunel designed station building is still there, but in a rather poor state at the moment. But we'll come back to that in a while. And there's a picture of the reduced service. In 1959, things were getting a bit quiet, so they cut it down to just a rail car for passenger transport. And that's a picture of it at Parkleys Bridge, which again we'll mention a bit later on too. Then the line was closed in 1964 to 1965. The passenger services were cut in 1964, and then goods services were cut in 1965. And after that, the track and sleepers and things were sold off, but the track bed is still there. So why do we want to have trains again? Well, first thing to remember is that we don't want any of those steam train things. It's not a historic line that we're planning to open. It's a way of getting people from one place to another as quickly and conveniently and environmentally sustainably as possible. So the first thing is that we want a regular service which is scheduled to align with the trains passing through the station at Kemble. And I suppose a line should really be synchronized in time. So it will, as a first objective, the electronically controlled train will set off from Cirencester in order to arrive at Kemble at the same time as, or just before, the train comes through, and it will return to Cirencester just after. So instead of arriving at Kemble to see the bus disappearing out of the car park, you'll arrive to find a neat little convenient vehicle waiting for you, which will just rush you up to Cirencester. And it will stop on the way, but we'll show you that too. The reason is it gives access for us residents, for visitors, and for business, and very important for the business opportunities it brings. It gives enhanced image and competitiveness to Cirencester. So if you're in London, at the moment, if you want to go to Cirencester, well, your options are fairly limited. But this will mean that you can hop on a train and you can get public transport all the way to Cirencester, and with very little delay, so that it's really very efficient and attractive for people to visit. That will increase the conferencing for the RAU and ordinary meetings, visitors, business opportunities. It'll give us local routes, but with a countrywide presence. So we'll be able to be visible to everyone. And that connectivity gives a huge boost to the Cotswold economy. The Gloucestershire County Council did a transport plan, and they estimated that some fairly minor changes to Kemble Station, increasing the car park and a lick of paint and things, would improve the local economy by £28 million a year, was their figure. And we're looking at providing something a great deal more attractive and convenient. So the benefit should be huge. Obviously, we haven't been able to estimate that, but hopefully we'll be able to get the Gloucester County Council to put this into their model and see how that affects people's movements and the overall economy. But I've darkened there the particularly important things for me. This is environmental enabling infrastructure, by which I mean...
Let's just take this out for a moment.
By which I mean the putting in place the infrastructure that allows Britain to meet its commitments to reducing carbon. And that, to me, is the most important crisis that we have looming, is that we need to reduce it. It's on the news all the time now, but we need to reduce our carbon footprint, and this vehicle is an excellent way of doing that. And partly it's through this year. This is another government buzzword. We need to increase the modal shift from cars, get people out of cars and into public transport wherever possible. You can't always. Sometimes you've got things to move that you can't move through public transport, but an awful lot, or a very high percentage of your journeys could be done on this sort of vehicle. So it's a sustainable long-term solution. Now, the reasons we've chosen now is that the expanding population of Cirencester, obviously a Chesterton development, 2,350 homes, roughly, that's an awful lot of people. And what we want to provide is a facility so that when people are buying a home there, they can think, well, because that's there, I don't need to buy that extra car. I don't need 2 cars, I just need 1. Or maybe even I don't need any cars, and I just need 1 for holidays, and I hire that. So the second feature is that the main line through Kemble is being redoubled. That is 2 tracks instead of 1. And that means more train services, and so a greater opportunity to get quickly down to Swindon and London. And obviously now there's great pressure, and we felt that this was a time when the government should be prepared to hear people like us who have solutions to the carbon dioxide problem and global warming. And this is one of those solutions. So what is very light rail and why is it better? Well, the first thing is it's a fully battery powered vehicle. So electric, but it doesn't need overhead cables, it doesn't need the gantries and the catenaries. You may remember Jill Poyton telling us all about catenaries a few months, oh gosh, perhaps a year ago. We don't need that. We don't need a powered third rail or any other hazardous approach to it. The thing has enough battery power to get itself up and down the line a few times, and it only takes a few minutes to charge. So it can charge while it's waiting for passengers to board at Kemble or while it's waiting for people at Cirencester. The cost of VLR, very light rail, is a great deal less than train or tram. And the reason is because it's so much lighter. And now you'll be able to see that where it comes to bridges and track structure, that being lighter obviously makes life a lot cheaper. But there's a much bigger and more important feature. Where you have buried services under the roads, if you're putting in heavy rail, you have to dig 600 millimeters down in order to put in the foundations and make it strong enough. But all the buried services, drains, water supplies, and signaling cables, they all have to be beneath 300 millimeters. And that's where most of them are. So if you put in heavy rail tracks, you have to move all the services out of the way, and the cost of that is phenomenal. So they estimate that a heavy rail track costs £50 million per kilometre to install, which is a breathtaking amount of money. Well, our experts are working on a target of £5 million per kilometre for a very light rail. There's still a lot of work being done to work out exactly how deep it needs to be, but certainly 300 millimeters is the maximum. And there are techniques being developed of what they call slab track, where there'll be a concrete plate with grooves in it, which we'll put in place, and then a rubber boot to give sound deadening, and then the rail is fitted into that. So that means that the installation of track is comparatively quick. Obviously, you have to level it and there has to be some foundation, but then laying the slab track over the top is very quick and straightforward. So that gives you a huge reduction in cost. One of the other factors, there are quite a few, is low platform cost. Because it's a very low vehicle, low to the ground, you can step into it from ground and you don't need a platform. Now, because we need to provide disabled access, we'll actually have to have a very small ramp to allow people to get in. But it means that we can, for example, where we go close to Cirencester College, we can put a halt there, a request halt, so people can dial in on their phones and just request that the train stops. Or along the way, there's a new technology park proposed. We can provide a request halt there, so that if somebody needs to get on or at the end of the working day, the trains can stop there or let people alight. And it's very straightforward to do. So when compared with some other forms of transport, one of the great things to realize is that the track life is up to 120 years, I suppose longer than that. But I was rather entertained by the first analyses of the costs, the expenditure and incomes for this project, and the consultants had done a spreadsheet on a year-by-year basis, and it went out to 120 years. And obviously, once you've paid off most of your installation, then you're making profit really. There's a bit of maintenance to do, obviously. You have to check your tracks and replace occasionally a bit of track, and the vehicles need to be replaced, but you're putting in a service which is infrastructure with a huge life. That means you're putting it there for the next 3 or 4 generations of Cirencester residents. Another feature that it has is that it doesn't have rubber tires. And together with being battery powered, that means it produces no pollution. So there's an effect called the Oslo effect. I don't know why it's called the Oslo effect, but it's the fact that rubber tires on a tarmac road produce quite a lot of particulate pollution. You might have heard people mention that sort of particulates, and it's the 2.5 very small particles largely, but it consists of little bits of road and bits of rubber and microplastics. And people are just beginning to realize that this is actually quite a problem. There was a figure produced which said that for a modern diesel car with a Euro 6 standard of exhaust, that 40% of its particulate pollution is actually coming off the tires and the road and the brakes, and that it's not the exhaust anymore that's such a big problem. So even if you move to an electric car, you've still got all that Oslo effect problem. And you have to bear in mind that if the alternative to this vehicle is a bus, then that's even bigger tires and a heavy vehicle that's being moved around, even if there's only one passenger in it. But of course, bear in mind also that electric vehicles are actually a lot heavier than internal combustion engine vehicle, because the weight of the battery actually means that your average electric car is probably 1.5 times the weight of a petrol car or a diesel car. So that's an issue which is important and will become more important as cars improve. So the main objective, reducing dependence on cars, it means that we can reduce the congestion that cars produce. And one of the alternatives that people have been proposing is self-driving cars. But actually, a problem with self-driving cars is that as more people can travel in them who couldn't drive, so even someone who's too young to drive would be able to travel in a self-driving car. So in fact, car usage goes up and the roads get more congested. So what we're offering here is an alternative that produces reduced congestion, reduced pollution, and reduced carbon dioxide. Now, important factor for this sort of thing is the reliability. And these sort of electric vehicles, there are some earlier versions in use around the country, and they are very reliable. They have a very high availability figure, something like 98 or 99%, which is very good certainly compared to buses. And pretty much this is using existing technology, which has come from the automotive industry. The light weighting is all based on modern materials and modern structures. And of course, the electric motors and controls and batteries are all coming from the automotive industry. So it's pretty much a shovel-ready concept. And that's what the government likes to hear. It's at the moment, the vehicle isn't quite ready to use, but this is what it's going to look like. And as you can see, work is progressing very well on it. This is expected to be ready for use in the spring for trials work. And this is a VLR vehicle which is under development by Warwick University. There's a group at Warwick called WMG, and they are designing and having built these vehicles and prototypes. And there's a new test track being developed at Dudley, where they'll be able to shake it down and get it all working properly. You can see that the design work is well underway. It'll have 20 seats but they have what they call crush mode, which doesn't sound so much fun, and especially at the moment with COVID. But by the time this is up and running, COVID will be a distant memory. But they can have 70 standing in crush mode, so that actually carries quite a lot of people. And they are incorporating into it, just in case, and just because people won't forget, they are working on designs like a vertical downward flow of air, so that germs are swept down and removed. And they're looking at coating all the surfaces that you might hold on to with antiviral materials, so that even if there is another pandemic, this will still be fine. And in any case, you know, a lot of diseases get transferred in public transport, and this will help to make it into a safe and convenient method of traveling. So, the very light rail environmental figures. These are quite interesting. We were impressed when we found this is data put together by the intelligence team of the Lufthansa Innovation Hub. And they'd compiled, I mean, a lot of it is sort of estimates, and it depends on how you compare things, but they've tried to standardize on one set of rules. And they've compared all sorts of different vehicles. We've removed quite a few from their tables so we can see a clearer comparison. I removed ships and I've removed bicycles from their list, just so that you can compare. Car petrol, car diesel is a bit better, car hybrid a little bit better, fully electric a great deal better. And you can see that it's the operation direct, and that means the fuel that makes it go. And obviously for an electric car, you haven't got the cost of the fuel. And this is not so much cost as the CO2 cost. So it's CO2 in grams per passenger per kilometre. And one of the big factors, of course, is that the VLR is carrying a lot more passengers, so that particularly the manufacture cost there in yellow is the life of the vehicle divided by the number of people that it carries per kilometre in its lifetime. And of course, if you look at an electric car, well, you probably have to replace it after 5 or 10 years. And certainly the batteries have to be changed, and that's a big part of the cost of the car. Whereas for us, the cost of the batteries is a very small part of the cost of the installation. So although it costs quite a lot of money to build a track, what you've got is then a system that produces very little CO2, and during its use, virtually none. The only significant cost there is the operation indirect, which is things like a driver. And to answer that question before it gets asked, we're probably expecting that in due course, the technology will become available for this to be a driverless vehicle. Initially, that won't be the case, and we may become the test bed where that sort of thing is run in parallel with a driver to evaluate it and to improve the design. But we'll see about that. So the route. So I hope you all enjoy looking at maps, because I've got a few. First of all, let's start at Kemble, down in the bottom left here. So at Kemble Station, we leave the Cirencester platform, as it was known, and we head across the car park over Windmill Road, which is the road that runs past the entrance of the station. We go over the A429, and that's something we'll come back to, because obviously it's a big gap. And then, see, originally, the old route followed this dotted path, which was virtually straight to there, and then it curved in and went along this, where there is now the dual carriageway, and finished up at the old station there. Now, when we came to look at that, well, it's fine up to about here. It can all be done, and then it gets a bit busy. Obviously, you've got to cross some roads, which is tricky. But in this area, you're running along the back of quite a lot of industrial units, and then it becomes a bit of a road, and there's a point here where it goes underneath Chesterton Lane, and there used to be a bridge, and it was quite a narrow bridge, and apparently lorries used to get stuck on it quite often. And when they closed the railway, they just filled it all in, so apparently the bridge is still under there. But then the other side, you've got Meadow Road, which is some housing, and then it runs down the slope, and, well, somebody's put dual carriageway along here now. In fact, there is enough room beside the dual carriageway, even under the bridge, there's enough room. But of course, you've got to cross the road to get to the other side, to the town side of it. So it gets really quite difficult, and all of these things add together to make it very expensive. So our first plan was that we were going to put a station here, and it would serve the Chesterton development, and other people could use it as well, but they'd have to get there by car or by bus or something. And then, well, if you're in your car, wouldn't you just drive on to Kemble? Well, it didn't really make a lot of sense. But then Mark Harris, who was our mayor, he decided that it might work if we took it across the fields and put a stop near the RAU, and then carried along beside the road. So we're servicing the other end of the Chesterton development still. Then we've got Cirencester College and the Deer Park. We've got the housing here in Chesterton, and then we come down and we can get into town to almost exactly the same place. And we go right past the Leisure Centre, St James's Place, and we're very close to the centre there. So it all started to make sense again. So it puts people near to the museum, and quite a lot of other features. So we'll look in a bit more detail here. This is leaving Kemble, and you can see this is another picture of Kemble Station. We would be using the Cirencester platform here, but we have to cut the track. We have to make sure it's never possible for our trains to get onto the main track, or for serious heavy rail trains to come down our route, because either way that would be a cause of embarrassment. So we leave, we go across the side of the car park, we cross Windmill Road at the level of the road. The terminology is at grade. That just means it's a level crossing, so there would have to be lights to control that. And it then rises up onto this embankment, and then we reach this bridge here. And this bridge was completely removed, and the road was straightened. So it's in fact quite a wide gap now, but we'll have a look. And it's about 70 meters in total, but with these pillars here supporting, the central span is about 40 meters, which is very doable. And you can see that it's quite an elegant structure that they've designed. This is an artist's impression. No, actually, it's an engineer's impression. And I don't think he's got the sizes right, because he's made this thing look about 3 times the size of an articulated lorry, which isn't right. So you'll have to imagine that it's a lot smaller than that, or that the lorry is a lot bigger. In fact, I think, yes, the lorry would probably be a lot bigger than that. But you can see also the structure that they're planning. They drive deep piles in. It's all very feasible. Note that the Thames flows through underneath here the other way as well. So we're crossing over that too. Yep. Right. So having crossed over the main road, we follow the original alignment, which is what they call the old track, as far as Park Lees, and that's the Park Lees which was in that old photo. This is the bridge. It's still there. It's still very sound. It's used for cars going over to the farm, but that's all. And there's enough width there for our train to go under quite easily, and also there's room there for a cycle path. So that's an important factor, as I'll mention in a bit. It then crosses over open fields, which is comparatively straightforward. It would need more foundation built, because along the old alignment, there's still a lot of very solid foundation. But in the open fields, we just have to be careful to protect against deer and badgers and sheep and goodness knows what. But then we arrive at the university station there. And that's going to look something like this. And so you've got the station platform there, and you've got a passing place, a passing loop, so that you can have two trains, one's going from Cirencester to Kemble and the other's coming back the other way. And timetables have been worked out to allow regular services with something like 15 minutes interval is the sort of figure you're talking about. And this car park is quite a large car park, partly because that allows people to then to park there. A lot of people at the moment come to Kemble from Cheltenham and Gloucester, and this would allow people to stop here, and rather than going on down the narrow roads. But it also then becomes a sort of de facto park and ride system, because the train is already going to be running to and fro, so you don't have to worry about providing a bus. It just gives an opportunity for people to park out here and go and visit Cirencester. So it improves the accessibility of Cirencester, even at very busy times, for shopping and business visits. So the entrance to this would be opposite the entrance to the university college workshops, which is quite handy. The route would then cross over the road that goes into Chesterton Estate here, the new housing development, and it runs alongside the southeast side of Kemble Road, Tetbury Road. And this is a close-up of that area, and you can see the dotted line. It's coming along here. We were considering having it cross over and run through this. Now, this is a new development which is proposed, and it looks like it's going ahead. It has outline permission, which is called University Gate, and is planned to be a technology park. So for those of you who haven't heard that news, that should be interesting, and should provide an opportunity for high-tech agricultural-based companies to have head offices and branches there. So we were planning to come up through the middle of that, but it presented the problem that there's an area here, which we'll move to in a moment, which would be very congested. So instead, we're coming up and across this roundabout here. So I'll have a close-up of that, and you can see this bit. It's called the Old Tetbury Road, although I suspect it's more the Old Stroud Road. But this has now been, or is being, turned into a car park. So there's cars going in and out of here. There's students milling about, either on foot or on bicycle. And there's obviously the caravan park, the college entrance for cars down here. So we felt, quite a few people suggested to us, that it might be just too much trouble going through that area. But it was proposed actually by the local representative of highways that we could go across the middle of the roundabout, and I thought, whoa, that sounds really quite a scary prospect. Life's complex enough without having a tram going through the middle, as it were. But it turns out that that's actually what happens in a lot of places, particularly Amsterdam, and there's one in Morocco. But it's something that continental tram systems are very familiar with. So what I want to show you now is a model of this. This is just partly for me to try out something even more complex. And what I want to show you is a model. This is on the web, so it's on YouTube. So I'm going to share with you this video with luck. So can you see a picture says complex roundabout? Okay, you can. That's excellent. So if I start this, you can see the simulation. This is all computer simulation, but it's a junction with 4 main roads and 1 subsidiary road, dual carriageway, and a train, 2 tram tracks going through the middle. And it shows where the lights are that stop the trams and the cars. At the moment, the cars are operating. But you can see the lights have gone yellow and then red, and then a tram comes through. And you can see the traffic build up on the road, but that's not a problem because it's a roundabout is a place where traffic is moving fairly slowly anyway. Now, this is rather a fun simulation, and it's actually very easy to just sit and watch it for quite a while in a sort of mind-numbing sort of way. It's just fun to watch all the little cars doing and froing. The other thing to watch out for is occasionally there are little black dots on this outer ring, like this one there. That's it. And those are pedestrians. And every now and then one materializes suddenly and then just walks across the road. And generally they seem to get across, like this one down here. They get across without getting run over, but that one does almost get himself killed. So I think that's a little extra feature that they've thrown in. Oh, there goes one. He's getting in the way of the traffic. But they're obviously very benevolent drivers. Still, anyway, we'll move on quickly before we get absorbed into it. Now, I think I have to share back to my original one, and that should allow us to, have we gone back to the presentation? Excellent news. I'm getting signals from my wife. So, oh, I better stop that running before it drains my brain. So anyway, it appears that that is quite a feasible approach, and that we can have a tram, a train going across the middle of a roundabout, and we just have sets of lights which stop the traffic. The advantage of going across that way is also that we then are not stopping 2 roads separately. Because we've got to get from here to here, we'd have to cross 2 roads somewhere, or the dual carriageway side here. And particularly interesting, this road is proposed to become dual carriageway once the Chesterton development is underway. So it's all going to get quite complicated here, but we'll hopefully be in at the beginning and will get taken account of. The other thing that's likely to get quite exciting is this area here, the road from Chesterton Lane, where it comes out. They're planning to put traffic lights there so that you can turn right and down the hill into town. So yeah, well, we're going to have to wait and see what actually happens there. This is the final part of the journey, and we come down the hill past the leisure centre, SJP, and we pull up on the pavement. It's a wide pavement here, opposite the old station. Here's the old station building, but we'll have a closer look at that in a moment. I measured it out. I made it 350 steps from the marketplace, which I think is pretty good. That's as close as you're likely to get. It's also quite easy for the buses to access from the dual carriageway if this were to become a transport hub. So one of our proposals is to try and make this as integrated as possible. In many cases, integrated transport is talked about and is something of a pipe dream, but we are proposing putting a cycle path alongside The exact route isn't too certain, but most of the way it's very easy. We can run alongside here. There's a tricky bit. We can't really let cyclists go across our bridge, so they have to come down and cross the road under the bridge, and then there's a route round the outside and up to the station. So we're proposing that, and in a way we're acting as enabling technology for that cycle path to be built. So spin-off benefit there for the cyclists. We're also, as I mentioned to someone before the talk, we're very much in favour of a bus station on the old station car park, this area in blue here, because it would be convenient for access to the town, for access to the dual carriageway for the buses, and it would give added incentive for people to use the train. So it gets people into a system where they can get from London, and using a bus, they can get to all the outlying villages or to other parts of Cirencester. It's too convenient. So where are we? What have we got to? Well, we've been doing the feasibility study, and we divided it into primary and secondary phases. The primary phase was there to develop the business case. And then we separated out a preliminary phase where we checked for showstoppers, which just making sure that there wasn't anything that was going to make it all a waste of time. Now that's all been completed. We're just about to complete the rest of the primary phase. The sections have been written, and they're just being tied together into a one document, unifying the standards and the styles, and keeping it so it looks as if it all belongs together. And once that's complete, we'll be looking to start the secondary phase, which will do much more detailed design, produce more accurate costings, and will prepare us for a Transport and Works Act application. TWA is something that you have to do in order to get approval to go ahead with a project of this magnitude. And as much as anything, it's to give you the compulsory purchase rights, and to make sure that it ties in with all the bodies that you're dealing with. For example, Network Rail and GWR, organisations like that. So we already have the Cotswold District Council very much on side. They're very keen on this whole project. And so we're working together to prepare for the TWA. But we are told that generally a TWA can take about a year and can cost about £1 million, partly because it goes through a legal process at Westminster, which requires representation by very expensive people. So there is talk, you may hear talk of the government working on this process. At the moment, it has a process called WebTag, by which it analyzes projects, but that penalizes projects if they slow down the cars on a route. And obviously that impedes, it puts trains and trams and such projects at a disadvantage, because yes, they will slow down the cars, but you know, that's the way it is. WebTag also doesn't really provide any tick in the box for projects that reduce the carbon dioxide that are produced, for reduced carbon footprint. So environmental benefits don't really weigh, and that is clearly not appropriate these days. It's a very important aspect of any project, and that's something which needs to be changed. To some extent, the legal process, the planning process is still favouring the automotive industry, and I think the days for that are numbered. So hopefully life will get easier. Maybe we'll be able to get it done more quickly than the year and £1 million. So this is what we did in the primary phase. We identified the best route. Well, I've shown you the majority of that. A few little details to iron out, and we're in discussion with landowners. The geotechnical issues, particularly the embankment, along the straight part of the old alignment. That foundation structure is very sound. It was well built at the time, and our vehicle is so much lighter. Of course, it won't provide any threat to that structure. Environmental issues, we've checked for protected species, and there's nothing that's going to cause us any problem there. Structures, the bridges and the crossings have all been analysed, and the bridges checked or designed, as the case may be. We've had a safety analysis, risk analysis, which has gone into great detail on every crossing and the operation of the vehicle and the speeds and all the technology that's involved, and that's all fine. There are solutions to everything. And we've done a section which is analysis of transport integration with buses and cyclists. And we've also had letters of support from quite a number of bodies, but key important ones are the RAU, Bathurst Estate, who own a good part of the land that we're crossing, and Network Rail, with whom we'll be having to integrate, particularly as they own the car park at Kemble and things like that. So the next issues, we had a bit of a problem with the patronage figures. Obviously, so normally you'd go with a clipboard and you'd stand on Kemble Station and ask people where they're going and how they got there and things. Well, we can't do that, and even if we did, it wouldn't mean anything at the moment. The car park's almost empty. But things will recover to some extent. It'll be different. People will be doing less travelling, but more people will be coming to live in this area. The interest in moving to Cirencester has shot up, and that will be largely people moving out of London who will be working from home mostly, but they will need to go down to visit head office one day a week, one day a fortnight, whatever. So we've tried to estimate patronage figures on a theoretical basis, and we got some consultants, some experts from Southampton University who have done a theoretical analysis using their computer model. It's not brilliantly appropriate because it doesn't include things like tourists, which obviously are a significant part of our footfall. But we're making allowance, and some features have changed, of course. The University Gate technology park, that's only just been agreed. So suddenly that's a whole lot more people who will be using our service. So the patronage figures are something where there's quite a lot of work to do, but already we're seeing that the route can pay for itself with some very reasonable assumptions. We've got to agree details of the route with the landowners, particularly Bathurst Estate, but there are a number of other little landowners, and we've also got to sort out, there has to be a planning application for it. And this is, I mean, it's a complicated thing to do, but the CDC planners are very much on side and helping us. And then the final thing that we have to sort out for the secondary phase is funding. We've been invited by the Department for Transport. They say they're ready to work with us on how best to take this project to the next stage. In fact, newsflash there is because about a week ago, just over a week ago, we were notified that there is a fund which is being run by the Department for Transport called Restoring Your Railway. And we applied for that some months ago, and there were 60 applicants. The first 10 successful applicants were notified a couple of months ago now, and we are in the second batch. We're in the second round of successful applicants, and they're talking about £50,000 towards our feasibility study. Now, in fact, the full secondary phase is about 120,000 is what the market price seems to be, and so that's the figure that we're having to raise. But it's partly the money. Obviously, money is very nice, but also it's the fact that Department for Transport have looked through this proposal, they've analysed it carefully, and they're not renowned for giving money away unnecessarily, and they have decided that this one is worthwhile. And that is a great asset when we come to talk to other people about funding to get the rest of the money, and just giving momentum to the whole project. It means that, yes, unless something very strange happens, this is going ahead. This will happen. And it's very exciting for the team. So the current position is we see ourselves leading the way for low-cost, very light rail solutions. The technology is appearing, and in Coventry, they've got a very expensive light rail project, which they plan to build a network across the city, starting with one route. But they've been offered sums of money that are huge compared with ours. But you see, they have got a lot of infrastructure under the ground, and that puts up their cost enormously. Whereas almost all of our route is just across open land or old rail track, just the part coming down the hill into the town. There are some services under there. There's a drain, a water main, a phone cable, but really very little to worry about. But very light rail does give us a huge advantage there. So we're seeing it that Coventry is leading the way on urban projects, and we're leading the way on rural projects. And if you look around the country, there are a lot of towns which need to be linked up to the rail network. And they haven't perhaps got our incentive. We can say that we are one of the few university towns that doesn't have a railway station. And that's a club we don't want to be a member of. So hopefully we can put that right. We're certainly in tune with Green Cirencester's awareness of the importance of the environment. I think being a rural town, we're very aware of the importance of nature and the environment around us. And we're in step with the government's plans for green transport infrastructure and integrated transport solutions, to use their buzzwords. So that's very much how we see us moving forwards. There's another little question that people often ask is, well, then what? Once you got that going and you can show that it works, well, we've had a lot of inquiries. A lot of people are saying, well, what about, so the first one was the old route that we were looking at, but going down into Love Lane. There's a lot of people there could travel to work on it, and that would be a benefit. So that would be a possibility. Equally, we might provide an alternative route round the edge of the Chesterton development, which would act as a way of linking people easily from Love Lane up to the middle of town, or as parking, so that people can buy things in Love Lane. More and more, Love Lane is full of effectively shops, people like Jessie Smith's, where you could go and have a meal and buy your food. So places like that would find it a benefit. In addition, the CDC and Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown are very keen that we should have a route down to the water parks. They plan to improve the facilities at the water parks. So that would be something they would like, and it might fairly easily go on down to Cricklade. That's quite an easy route from the outside of Siddington onwards, but getting into to join up in Love Lane, going through Love Lane, that's a bit tricky, a bit messy. And the other one that we've had inquiries about, what about Tetbury? And yes, we've got to cross the main line, which we could do by going underneath it because it's raised up to the north of Kemble. And then it would be able to take in Cotswold Airport, and there are plans for making that into a transport hub. We'll see how things go on that after COVID. The big problem that they have for the Tetbury line is that it's owned by many different farmers all the way down. So the negotiations would be entertaining. We have a big advantage that we really are dealing with a couple of minor landowners, and Bathurst Estate. And because Bathurst Estates see a lot of spin-off benefit in the question of the prices of their houses that they're going to build here. Houses are worth a lot more if there's a station next to them. So they can see that we're people who are on their side, and they're on our side. So those are the far distant projects. But first of all, we'll get the yellow one going, and once we can show people that it works and it's convenient and it's not a nuisance to people, then we can look at the opportunities around. So to sum up, thank you very much for listening to me. The project welcomes this opportunity to tell you about it and to show why it's a wonderful thing. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments. And that means, okay, yeah, questions, anyone? So I'll...
Can I come in first of all, Richard, and just say thank you very much for a very clearly and excellently presented outline. I think you've done it very well indeed. I won't be difficult with my economist's hat on and start questioning you about a whole series of things that I would have looked at if I was doing my project analysis. But I am interested in terms of what numbers might in due course use it, because have you got any idea roughly what the overall initial stage of the project would cost? Are we talking about sort of 20, 30 million, something like that?
Well, as I mentioned, the cost of the track is probably about 35. It's about 7 kilometres that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's about £35 million for that, plus the costs of a couple of vehicles and the station with some sort of shed with some servicing equipment, some battery chargers, that sort of thing. Obviously, construction of car parks and so on. There's quite a lot to do there. So the current figures, well, something between 45 million and 52 million, that sort of region. What our consultants have done is that they've taken that as fairly well defined. They've actually done a very detailed analysis, even down to things like the maintenance of fencing, the cost that will be reallocated for that. So a lot of detail on that, but the big unknown, how many passengers do you get? So they've been able to say, okay, well, assuming that during the first few years you have this many, this is how much income you get, a little bit of money for advertising, a little bit of money from the car park, so a few assumptions that you make, and they've been able to come up with figures that indicate that a mid-range footfall gives us a reasonable return. It certainly pays its way in terms of annual running costs. A lot of it depends on how much money we can get granted by the government, essentially. Although it turns out that there are quite a lot of long-term investors, people like pension funds, who are happy to invest in a 60-year project. And the interest rates at the moment are comparatively low, and so there are some good deals about. But we reckon that on a mid-range footfall, we can cope with a situation where 50% is paid for by the government, and maybe 50% comes from a long-term investor who is looking for a return eventually, as long as they don't mind waiting for their return to build up as footfall increases. But obviously, the more money that comes from central government, and personally, my belief is that if the government is serious about getting this country and this planet into a state where it's going to get through the next century, then I think this sort of investment has to be made. The sort of sums of money that they're talking about for house improvements and things would make 50 million seem fairly good value. So this and similar projects around the country, I think, need to be looked at and need to be put in place.
Yes, I think if I may say so, I think the strong case is that this is a sort of flagship project for appropriate green public transport. You know, that really is an interesting one.
Yes, you know. And the benefit to the local economy is very real. I mean, it really does help a lot. Now, it's a shame that it isn't already just about to be opened, because I think we need a boost to tourism here, you know, in the next 6 months. And it's going to take longer than that. But I think it will take many years to recover from COVID, to build back up again. And this will, possibly in 2 or 3 years, we'd be getting to the point where it would be a factor in that.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Richard. I've got to go now because I've promised to be somewhere at 8:30, which it just passed. But thank you very much. Fascinating lecture and well done. And I have had requests from various people to say, are we going to be able to put it up on our website? So
yes,
we can have a talk about that later.
Well, I've been recording it, and I'm certainly happy to put the presentation up on the website.
That'd be great.
But I can, in the meanwhile, take any questions if anyone else has any questions, and I can be my own admin. So,
Richard. Okay, thanks, Richard. All right, bye.
Okay.
Can I share the screen?
Yes, I can unshare the screen. Yep.
I've got a question, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
The ability to recharge the train in 5 minutes seems to me slightly optimistic.
That is what they're telling us can be done.
I think Tesla would be absolutely delighted, since it takes about 7 hours to charge one of their cars.
Well, yeah, but the fast charging technology is coming along, and batteries are improving. So the manufacturers are saying that 5 minutes is pretty well. And obviously, we don't need to recharge a whole battery. It's only a part of its life, but we can do that. They're telling us, yes, that's not a problem. It's fairly impressive charging equipment, and I suspect it hums a bit while it's working. But yeah, they claim that can be done.
Well, it seems pretty critical if the train is going to be going backwards and forwards all day.
Yep. No, and they say it can be, you know, that it will do many thousands of cycles without a problem. So, yep, that's work. So, Marion.
Yeah. Just a thought, there are driverless systems working in this country at the moment. I mean, DVLR is running, and there are other ones around the airport, so I don't think it would be difficult to put in driverless trains, do you?
Well, it's I think at the moment it's more a question of confidence, but a lot of the systems that are in use have protected routes so that they're fenced off and you don't get people on them. We will almost certainly have the potential for wild animals or farm animals to be on the route, and particularly where it goes down the hill into the town, there's likely to be students wandering about, and they're not renowned for being fast moving, so you know they generally get in the way. So we have to assume that at the moment people wouldn't be happy with it. But if you look at the technology that is now in cars, where it's doing lane management, it's doing braking, it's spotting what's in your lane ahead of you and it's following it, the technology is moving forwards very quickly. And certainly, I mean, some of the Teslas do claim, I know there's been some high publicity problems where they've hit vehicles and people, but compared to the amount of miles that have been done, it's actually quite impressive. I think there was somebody arrested recently in America because he was sleeping in his car. He'd set it on auto and put it on the motorway, and then he just had a snooze. And, so that didn't seem like a good idea, but obviously people are doing it. And I suspect if one's been caught, there's probably a lot more that are doing it.
That's right.
So,
Thank you.
So I think in 5-10 years that will be available. Yes, Terry.
That's fascinating, Richard. Thank you very much for that. One of the ironic things is that we finished the Cirencester branch line with a rail car system, and we're going to go back to virtually the same thing, but electric driven. I think it's absolutely fascinating to see this sort of how we've gone round in a circle technology wise.
Well, I like to think that ours looks a lot smarter and slicker than
quite, because the rail bus was, of course, based on an old AC bus system. So anyway, one other question I have on the station car park. I think you were very clear to say that what you're actually thinking would be that the car park itself would be turned, in fact, into a bus hub. And that would leave us with the opportunity to still do something with the old building without it being compromised for use as a bus station, as it were.
Yes, absolutely.
To be quite honest.
Yeah.
And of course, we will lose car parking, which CDC will be very happy about.
Well, yes, it will lose car parking, but obviously there will be more car parking, on the periphery. The new car park at the old dog kennels, which is going to be open fairly soon, and the system, once it's up, will provide shopping and certainly working parking at our new station. So it will transfer that out of town, but I don't know exactly how many buses there are likely to be, and we don't at the moment have a big bus park. But it would be quite easy to park quite a few buses in that area and still have car parking.
Yes, yes.
So, and obviously, it would mean that then a lot more people were in the vicinity of the old station building, and I can quite see that being brought back into use in some form or other, though I think perhaps some parts of it might need some serious refurbishment or even pulling down. But people have been talking about bringing that into use as a bus building for people to cafe and this sort of thing, and also as a community centre room and things. So I think it would be quite a useful opportunity for all of us.
Well, that's right, because if we go with the community use, then of course we will have to have things like public toilets. And one of the plans was that we were going to put a train coach carriage alongside the platform and turn it into a cafeteria. So that would be a dual purpose use there.
Right. Okay. Well, that would be interesting. Well, I think it's something Richard, to talk about. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, Richard, can I come in?
Oh, yes, Jack.
Yes. Talking of car parking, one of the things I think that may be a big attraction going forward is if Cirencester becomes a potential employment hub, and with the closing down of our friends at Honda, there's a lot of people who probably have got some of the skills that could be useful here. And were that the case, the Swindon change at Kemble Cirencester route may be a viable alternative for people to journey to work here.
Well, indeed, but in fact, Cirencester is a net employer. I think, I can't remember the figure, but it's something like 1,000 people come into Cirencester more than leave. So, that is a major factor. And so people are coming in to work.
But the more we can facilitate that, the other thing is that this is tangential to that, but looking ahead, on a visit to Bruges, more than one visit to Bruges, I was very impressed by their underground car parking, and a little bit like Hyde Park, where it's all green on top and trees grow and lovers sit on benches and people while the time away. But in the case of Bruges, they've got, I don't know over egg it, but a several stories deep car park. that has the advantage of being more secure at night because it can close at a certain time, and by close it would mean close because there'd be no entry available. And people worry about car parks. They're a bit unsightly at best, and they can be centres of bad behaviour at night. So I think if we had really good, strong car parking tangential to extra transport, that would be a useful additional prong.
Yes, well, that's certainly one of the things to be discussed, and obviously the CDC, the planners are working on solutions to all of these problems. We're offering them one part of a solution, and
Yes.
we'll fit in with whatever they have. There's a question from the Waddell family.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed I can. Hello.
Yes. I admire all the work you put in and the clarity of it, but with the very complex roundabout, I was concerned that the traffic seemed to be driving on the right and going round the roundabout in an anti-clockwise direction. Now, a lot of the drivers in Cirencester are elderly, and they might disobey that.
Thank you very
This
much.
is taking Euro membership just a stage too far, I think.
Well, that just happened to be the model. There is one track over roundabout in the UK at the moment that we know of, but most of them are on the continent. So the models tend to be right-hand drive ones, or no, left-hand drive ones, I suppose, driving on the right. But yes, and yes, in terms of the work that's gone in, we happen to have accumulated a very effective and hard-working team of people, including Jan, who on my screen is just above you, but she's been doing a lot of reading of documents and finding out of what's going on in planning and things, and been very effective in keeping it all going. And so there's a team of 5 or 6 of us.
Richard, could I ask a question?
Yes, Audrey.
It's Warren, actually.
Oh, well, Warren. Oh, yes.
Yeah, Audrey's got a deeper voice all of a sudden. 2 questions. One, have you considered hydrogen as a power source for the vehicles? And the other question is, have you thought about localized crowdfunding, offering people shares in your company?
Well, both of those we have considered, yes. And in fact, although we're talking to WMG about their vehicle, and at the moment that is electric, when pressed, they say, well, it's just a question of power source, and they can quite easily put in a hydrogen-powered engine. The problem with hydrogen is the cost of the infrastructure. And I know people who've been working on hydrogen-powered engines, and yes, the technology is fine, but in terms of rails and things, it's the cost of installing it and maintaining it. But on the other hand, we have been contacted by a company in California who make these vehicles as well. They make electric vehicles, but they also do a hydrogen option. And what they provide is a machine, rather a sort of 10 times size petrol pump, which generates hydrogen. So it's powered from the electricity supply, and it has a tank of hydrogen, and it just fills it up for you by electrolysis. I don't know how effective it is. When I tried to produce hydrogen by electrolysis when I was at school, I got an awful lot of scummy mess, and I suspect there's a lot of technical problems to go with it. But equally, I'm sure they can all be overcome. So that is something. Well, we're very happy. At the moment, we're just saying we'll build a track, we'll do this, and the detail of how it's powered. I mean, it could be that for the first 10 years we have electric, and then we review when we come to buy replacements. We review the vehicles that are available and the technologies that are available, and move to something different. You know, I don't think it'll be solar powered, but there's always the opportunity. And in all of these vehicles, most of the manufacturers are saying, well, you know, whatever power sources are available, we can fit into the space. So yes, in terms of crowdfunding, we have looked at it. There's an awful lot of constraints on it, and it gets very complex to administer. So we thought we'd start off by seeing what we can get out of central government, and with a bit of support from local businesses. The first part of the feasibility study was done by funding from Winston Trust, St James's Place, Town Council, District Council, and they paid for that. Obviously, we've got 50,000 now. We're hoping we'll go to the Local Enterprise Partnership and hopefully get some support from them. And so we'll see. I think there's lots of things like that are last resorts, but it may be that we find ourselves in a position of needing the last 10 million or something, in which case that might be a very good way of getting people involved, getting people getting into their way of life. So yes, it would be something that would be very interesting to use.
Have you tried HRH or Dyson? Dyson would be very, very interested, I think.
Yes, we haven't spoken to Dyson. We haven't spoken to HRH either. We were thinking we might invite him to come and open it, but we'll see how we go on that. But I think for me, it's something that central government should be looking after at this stage. And if they really can't, then we'll look at alternatives. But it's a good point. We will make a note of those for when we get to that stage. That's good. Okay. Any
question, Richard? Yes. About patronage. It's about family visits. A lot of people use trains to come visit their family, students and other family members. That wasn't actually covered. We talked about tourism, not actual family visits, and also shopping. You know, if there's a local train service, perhaps people want to go shopping into Cirencester.
Oh yes, well certainly. Yeah. One thing we have been told is that people who live in Kemble are very keen to have this train there, because then they can just nip into Cirencester to do their shopping.
Yeah.
Which yes, certainly. It's going to cut both ways. I think people from Cirencester may nip out to Swindon to shop, but equally there are a lot of people in Swindon who like to come to Cirencester. So yes, and families. The estimate and the model which was done for patronage assumed that given a certain number of people living nearby or working nearby a station, a proportion of them will use it. It's a very much statistical tool. So it doesn't try and work out why people are going. It just says, well, if you've got 10,000 people living here, then so many of them are likely to use it. It doesn't even try and say, well, somewhere like Cirencester, there would be a lot more traffic in the summer than in the winter. And of course, we have special events which would benefit hugely from it. Things like the Cotswold Show will have a stop right next to it. So that would be an ideal opportunity. The Phoenix Festival, when that's on, getting people in and out of the town, it's an ideal solution, especially if they're not entirely fit to drive anymore on the way back. Then you know, if they come up from Swindon to listen to the music, then they'll be able to get home safely. So that would be good.
And the other thing was about Cirencester College. That didn't seem to come up, but there's about 2,500 students there. I know most of them use the buses, but whether some of them might use the trains.
Yes, indeed. Well, we have been in talks with Jim Grant, who runs that, and he's given us figures for the total number of students. In fact, they did a sort of a survey of their students. Of course, a lot don't live in places which would be convenient for the train anyway, and they have a very widely spread what do you call it, patronage? That's not the, but anyway, the students come from a lot of villages and places where a lot of them do come in shared cars and, as you say, buses, but this would open up new opportunities. And
it would be the quickest way for anybody who wants to go uptown to see the West End show or music or all sorts of things.
Well, indeed, yes.
So many opportunities.
Yeah, well, we're particularly, as we intend that, it will meet every train. So if there are trains running late on a Saturday evening, if you go up to the theatre at the moment,
yes,
you can't get back by train,
no.
you know, or you're going to walk from Swindon. But this would still be working into the late night because people would need to get back. And so it's something that can be very much more easily organised. So yes, it's... Oh, Anne Boxall's saying something, but she's muted her mic. So Anne, if you want to unmute, that would be better. Oop, now she's having trouble with the phone.
Can I ask you something, please, Richard? You talked about getting from platform at Kemble along the old line through the car park. How do you intend getting across the road? Is it, I can't remember the name of the road actually. Is it Station Road?
Oh, Windmill Road it's called. Yes, Windmill Road. Yes. Well, we had quite a lot of discussion about that. There used to be a bridge there, but when the bridge was removed, it looks as though the road was raised. So if we wanted to go back by bridge over the top, we would have to dig the road down again. And of course, we have to allow enough height for all the vehicles that go along there, which is coaches and tractors, combine harvesters, and also the Network Rail use Kemble as a place to put trains onto the track. So they arrive with huge low loaders with locomotives on and things. So putting a bridge over there could be quite tricky. So the experts have recommended that we do that at a level. That is that we have a level crossing there, which is with controlled lights and so on, so that it's automated. But it allows the train priority, but obviously there has to be a good mechanism for stopping the cars and cyclists and any pedestrians and that sort of thing. But you know, that is all known technology and can be done very safely.
Richard.
Yes.
Thank you.
Richard.
Hello. Yes.
It's Chris Evans.
Yes. Well, yes. You're given on the screen as Ursula Evans,
Yes,
but I can guess that's not right.
You mentioned about the wheels not having rubber tires.
Yep.
On the vehicle. So what are the wheels and what's the noise level anticipation on the journey?
They are steel wheels, but the vehicle has suspension, so that it's not like the way that vibration travels up through an ordinary railway carriage. And the other thing that you tend to notice of trains is that the wheels squeal when they go around corners.
Yeah.
And this is because they tend to be, in the old trains, they have fixed axles. So as you go around a corner, both wheels are going the same speed and they don't want to. So that causes a lot of noise, and it wears out the wheels as well, and the track. So these ones have actually, even the driven wheels, they've all got differentials, so that they're all driven, but they can go at their own independent speed within a range. And so the noise is very much reduced. In areas where we've got track mounted in rubber boot, then that also reduces the noise transmission through the ground. So the noise levels, I mean, obviously they're about to start testing and finding out exactly what they're like, but we're anticipating that it won't be a nuisance. It won't be a problem. It might just be enough to alert someone that it's coming, which is probably not a bad thing.
Could I also ask, what's the anticipated journey time from Cirencester to Kemble?
Oh, that's, did we think it was 7 minutes? But it's a bit more if it's stopping at the station.
Yeah.
I think, yes, so, and then 15 minutes as a round trip, I think was what we're looking at.
Right.
How much is the fare?
Well, that's a very good question, and that will depend on how many people we get. It's difficult to tell. Something like £3.50 or £4, something like that. But there will be special reductions for students, regular travellers, for buying it a long way in advance. For who knows? I mean, the ticketing is an art form in its own, but at the moment we've assumed some numbers in general as averages. And we think we can charge business people more than we charge. We'd like to have it so that for example, if mum finds that the kids are a bit bored today, they can just hop on the train and all go for a trip out to Kemble and back, and see the view and entertain the kids. It will also, as one of our members points out, it will be a very pretty journey, and as a sort of tourist feature in its own right. Your Japanese tourists coming to Cirencester by the shuttle, it's going to be a nice place to arrive in a nice way. Travelling through the countryside, along the ridge where you've got views out over the fields, and then across the farmland, and then down into the town. I think that's going to be a very attractive journey to make.
Years ago, I used to live in Richmond-on-Thames and then moved just slightly up the road to Kew, and I was very pleased to see that Kew had arranged with the local authority that every resident in the suburb, I suppose it's a suburb of Kew, had the facility to get a ticket to Kew Gardens, which gave them off-peak usage, and everybody made use of it because you avoided the crowd at weekend, and you thought, wait, no, I'll go and walk down to Kew instead of Richmond. It was very cost-effective, I understand.
Yes, well, also something like that, which would probably also apply to some extent, is the spin-off. I mean, people come to Kew, they bring the family to Kew. It might not cost them anything to get in, but then they have a cup of tea and they have a cake, and they, and so yes, it's certainly something like that makes it very cheap for residents to use off-peak. Certainly something that we'll be looking at.
And it adds to the community aspect too.
Yeah, quite. Well, indeed, it is important that this is something for the people of Cirencester. So, Anne, did you have a question?
Yes. If I were going to take the train and go to Paris eventually, say, how much room would there be for luggage? Because it looks as though it's sort of standing room.
Well, yes, it depends what time of day you go. Obviously, there will be times when it's quite busy. We are insisting that there's somewhere people can put their bicycle. If they use the cycle track and only get halfway and then want to get on their train. But it is important that people can take a bike with them. And yes, there will be room for luggage, but obviously when it's rammed, that will be a major inconvenience. So it's something where I guess the phone app will point out that if you're going at this time, please don't travel with luggage.
Yeah.
So, Richard, there is the point that we can stick two of the vehicles together in busy times if we want to. So that
yes, again, indeed.
It would be an analysis of patronage as to whether it's worth running two together or not.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Actually, although it's quite a small vehicle, it has, again, technology is moving ahead, and it will be able to travel as a train without actually hitching them together. So, so we get two vehicles at the outset. We get two vehicles, and they're traveling to and fro. But if we find that things are going to get busy during the summer, we can hire more vehicles and we can run each of those pairs together, so that we've got seating for 40 and standing room for 120, 140.
Excellent.
Which means that it's a very flexible system, and we can sort of grow it within reason to suit the need at the time.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. I think we perhaps should draw a veil under it there. I think it was a fascinating talk, and clearly a talk of great interest, as judged by the number of people who attended today and the number of questions. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, it's been my objective to let the people know about this plan, and I think everybody finds it a very interesting prospect. So very exciting.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Very well. Thank you for inviting me.